small deck. So I was thinking, hey, those guys should have been here as well and maybe talk about how that contrasts with this. But I think clearly this is a topic that generates a lot of interest, both at large corporations, of which I think there's some representation here today, and several startups in the making. So I want to make sure that I cover a few things before we turn it over to the panel for what I'm sure is going to be a great discussion. So a couple of things to start off with. I want to give you a quick overview, at least for the ones who are kind of new to TIE, of the organization. So really quickly, TIE is a nonprofit, and our purpose, our charter, is to foster entrepreneurship in the community. We have over 60 chapters around the world, so we're spread, I'd say, almost in every continent, I think, with about 13,000 members and 3,000 odd, or 1,200 odd charter members. And charter members are seasoned entrepreneurs who are actually people who, been there, done that, and who can serve as mentors and people who can help guide other entrepreneurs on that journey. In fact, a real quick show of hands, there are, I know, several charter members in the audience here today as well. Can you please put your hands up so you can make yourself known? There you go. So, a bunch of charter members, these are folks that I would highly recommend, if you get a moment, please go and talk to them, especially if you're starting down that journey. Our goal at TIE really is to help the entrepreneur on that journey almost from start to finish. And there's several ways in which we do that. Everything from education, and a panel like this is a great example of how we're helping to bring experts to you so that you can kind of learn from them and maybe generate new ideas for yourself. We provide mentoring opportunities, so we actually have a formal mentoring program where new startups or new entrepreneurs can be paired up with serial or successful entrepreneurs and really learn from them on very specific and in a pretty deep one-on-one kind of fashion. We also have a program for young entrepreneurs, which reaches all the way down into high school. The idea being, how do we generate interest in entrepreneurship and business in people who are kind of just getting started out. We have, as I mentioned earlier, a monthly networking event, the Startup on Tap event, which happens every second Tuesday, also in Bellevue. It's a great place where you can come and mingle with the charter members, other members, entrepreneurs in the making, and people who want to join startups. Just a great place to generate ideas and meet great people who are thinking of similar things. That event is always preceded by something called Startup 101. And that is an hour-long deep dive session by one of our charter members who takes a topic of interest to most new entrepreneurs. Everything from how do you raise money, or how do you really define value proposition, or what are the legal things you need to be thinking about, etc., etc. And somebody with a lot of experience and expertise in that space spends an hour or so going really deep into that topic. And we've got great feedback on all of these formats. Again, like I said, the idea is how do we help to touch the entrepreneur's life along their journey. The last piece of the puzzle for us for a long time has been that we weren't doing anything on the investment front. And with the launch of a Thai angel group recently, and in fact, is Harish Vaid here?
He just left.
He's outside, but Harish Vaid is the chair of our Thai angels group in Seattle. So we've now formally got an angel group, and the whole idea there is how do we fill in that, that remaining piece of the puzzle in a sense, where not only can now we help to educate, mentor, network, so on and so forth, but when you need money, we have a group of angels who, if your idea is good enough and if they feel interested, they're ready to invest. And this obviously is not an exclusive thing. We're more than happy to partner with other angel groups in the city, everything from Alliance of Angels to other forums like Karetsu and Zeno and so on and so forth. But it just gives our members one more place, one more forum where they can get both feedback on their business plans and, if it's good enough, actually raise money. So we're very excited about that. There's flyers, I believe, outside near the registration desk where you can learn more. If you're an angel in the making or if you want to be part of it, we'd love to hear from you, and you can sign up. There's a small fee of $5 for you to be an angel, even if you're not a charter member. Charter members are automatically eligible to be angels in our group. And if you're an entrepreneur who's looking to raise money either now or anywhere in the next, 6-12 months, definitely check it out, because this is going to be a great resource for you as you kind of continue down your journey. So those are a few things that I wanted to talk about TIE. I want to give a quick vote of thanks to our volunteers, and can I have our volunteers just put their hands up, please? Because it's frankly these folks who make all of this possible. So thank you very much. come and seek me out, or Harish, who's sitting here. Talk to us about how you can help. Any help that you can provide is much appreciated. Everything from, can you help with marketing, tie the chapter, can you help with the mentoring program, can you become part of the angel group as a volunteer? I mean, there's many, many possibilities that we have. So if you're interested in this space, if you want to work with other people kind of passionate about it, come talk to us. We'd love to get your help. I also wanted to talk about a few upcoming events. And as I mentioned, we have the monthly startup on tap, and the next one is on the 9th of April, and it's in the Via Vida Cafe in Bellevue, which is on 10th and 106th. So we'd love to see you there. If you've never been, we'd definitely encourage you to be there. On the 16th of April, we have a panel similar to this one on Health and Nutrition 2020. And it's again a topic of, I think, considerable interest to a lot of folks. So if you're around and if you have the time, we'd love to see you there as well. That's going to be right here. And on the 22nd of May, we're going to have a chat with Scott Oakey. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Scott Oakey, and especially if you play golf, because he happens to own a few golf courses here. But even otherwise, experienced guy, very seasoned executive and entrepreneur, or at least helping in the angel community. So I think he's going to have a lot of interesting things to say, which we'd love for you to come and be a part of. That is, I expect it to be here as well, Harish? Yeah. Okay, so that's also expected to be right here. So those are a few of the announcements on upcoming events that I wanted to talk about. And real quick, before I end, I did want to just call out Wistar. Wistar, would you make yourself known, please? So Wistar is from the State Department, no, the Washington State Department of, the Trade Office. Sorry if I misrepresented you. So Wistar, actually, some of our charter members have been collaborating with her office, and they were very successful recently at the Mobile World Congress, where actually the state helped to organize a presence, and I think our charter members were able to leverage that. So she just wanted to make it known that they would love to hear from other entrepreneurs, especially in the mobile space, who want to be represented or who want to have a presence at Mobile World Congress next year. We got a few months to plan this. It's going to be about, what, 11 months from now? But still, please go talk to her. She'd love to find a way to help you. With that, Umesh, I'm going to turn it over to you. Umesh, by the way, is also the man behind these events, because he helps to actually organize all of this. So thank you very much, Umesh.
Hello everyone. We are excited to have the panel going. I don't want to be any more delay. We have food, we have announcement. Now let's start the panel. We have a very exciting panel with Sheila from Tora Capital. We have Jim Malders from Intelligence. We have Andrew from Space Curve. We have Gina Hilal from Blue Kite, and Ahmed from Microsoft. So they will give the more introduction during the discussion, but without further delay, let's begin. Why big data is a big deal for entrepreneurs. Sheila.
Thank you so much, and thanks to everyone for being here tonight. So big data, we can all agree, is certainly big hype. And the hypothesis of the panel tonight is that there's a lot underlying that hype and that real excitement around big data. So we have an esteemed panel to speak to you tonight on big data. Tola Capital, we invest in big data companies. We invest in enterprise software companies that leverage data and leverage the cloud. So that's really my experience with it. I know some of you from Microsoft, from my SQL Server days there as well. And to me, big data really is, it's looking at the events and information in the world and being able to mine that information for patterns. And saying, sometimes you're using statistical models, sometimes you're using machine learning. What do you get out of those patterns? And the core of it really for me is the ability to algorithmically model and then predict the world. And that's the core of a lot of the investment hypotheses that we're looking at. If you can predict behavior, if you can model data in new and unique ways, bring together disparate sets of data that were heretofore not combinable, either because we weren't capturing that data or because databases and systems were too expensive or inflexible to do that, well, it opens up a whole new world. And so I wanted to start off the panel this evening with a set of introductions. What's your experience with big data? And how do you think about this new trend, this new opportunity, this new ecosystem from a definitional perspective? So I'll start with Jim.
Sure. So my name is Jim Adler. I'm the Vice President of Data Systems and Chief Privacy Officer at Intellius, and we're actually taking our big data engine that we built over the last few years and pointing it toward different markets. You'll hear the word INOM as the name around that effort. So I'm a Chief Privacy Officer, but I also wear a data hat. I'm not an attorney. I'm much more of a geek, nerd, engineer type. And I built out the team, and my team built out this architecture that deals with a lot of people-centric data. And we're really about how do people all fit together, and we'll talk about more of that as the evening progresses.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, so I'm Andrew Rogers. I'm the founder and Chief Technology Officer of a fairly late-stage startup at this point called SpaceCurve. So SpaceCurve is a real-time geospatial database platform that basically, to think about it, builds a model of the entire planet by using sensor data on the internet, transaction data, stuff from satellites, ground-based sensor networks, drones, whatever, and builds a coherent real-time model of the planet where you can start to study the behaviors and patterns that actually make the entire world move. And it's not just people, it's also animals and ecosystems and economies and things like that. Before I started this company, I actually designed the backends for Google Earth, so there is a pattern here. But prior to that, I also designed the some of the analytical systems for Netflix back in their early days, which are also kind of well known for their preference modeling systems. So I've been in this business a long time, and from my perspective, big data is really about measuring the reality. A lot of times we like to model things, they say, I have this hypothesis, and this is how we're going to model how things happen. And I view big data as, instead of saying I have this model of the world, I'm just going to measure it, and whatever comes out of that data, that's how I'm going to react.
Thank you, Dina.
My name is Dina Halal, and I run product for a company called BlueKai. BlueKai is a software as a service company that looks to help marketers harness this new kind of variety and velocity of big data they're inundated with. Actually, Gartner just published a report, I think a few months ago, that the CMO is going to outspend the CIO in IT spend by 2017. So big trend, marketers are trying to get ahead of it so that they can harness and use that data to serve consumers better advertising, better site experiences, better mobile experiences, etc. For me, I'll play the resident product person here. Big data is just a means to an end. It doesn't mean we all still have to find business problems, real life problems that people are trying to solve. Big data helps us do that, helps us do it better, helps us do it faster, and not try to get caught up on just using kind of the latest hot technology, but really solve a business problem.
Thank you.
My name is Ahmed Abdul-Qadir. I'm with, yes, amongst this team panel, I'm the only person who works for a big company, the Evil Empire, or what used to be the Evil Empire, Microsoft. I also had a brief stint at Google, so there's another Google connection here. I'm a machine learning guy, really. I worked on various machine learning problems. I'm a practitioner, a machine learning practitioner. In '97 I worked on handwriting recognition that now powers most of Microsoft Touch devices. I worked on Google. I worked in book search and Street View, computer vision. I'm sure most of you have used Street View. If you've seen these anonymized faces and license plates, I'm the one who built that. So if there's any face missing, you can actually blame me for that. I was part of Bing, Microsoft's search engine, help work on some of the core machine learning problems there. I also work in Ad Center. And right now I'm actually in a division of Microsoft. This is called Startup Business Group, hence the, this is how I relate to this community. So this is Microsoft's attempt to build a startup-like environment and invest in new ideas. And I'm running a startup that is trying to do something in the machine learning space. Trying to basically build a machine learning development environment. What does it mean to have a dev studio or Eclipse or or a data studio to develop machine learning components. What does debugging mean for machine learning? It's more than just building machine learning algorithms. There's a high demand for machine learning in the big data space. And how do we actually build tools that would help people build these components? Big data is actually, in the machine learning space, is having a big impact. I agree there's a little bit of hype, there's some hype there. But there's also results that are undeniable. So we're seeing disciplines like speech recognition and computer vision. We're seeing results that are improving over results that held out for like 10 and 20 years by using techniques like deep learning that know how to utilize very large amounts of data. So big data is real. It's actually, we're seeing its impact in machine learning. It's not for all kinds of problems. It applies for certain types of problems. It has to be used in a fairly specific way. So yeah, that's how I relate to it.
Great. So we have a great group here with a lot of different experiences, and we will later be asking the audience for questions as well. So start thinking of what you'd like to ask our esteemed panelists. So I'll kick it off with, I agree, I think a lot of people were talking about the application of data into solutions, into specific solutions to solve problems, solve business problems and other problems. What's the most fantastic application of data that you've seen to solve a business problem, and what was the outcome of that? I'll start with Dina.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about Lukai. That's the most fantastic. Take a marketer. Take an autos marketer. Autos, they have the most fragmented data you can imagine. So they've got national sites, so Ford.com. You go to Ford.com, you take a look at the cars. And then you go to Bing and you do a search and you're looking for a dealership, and then you end up on a dealership site. And then you're shopping around for cars, so you go to cars.com and you start looking and comparing makes and models. And you're interacting, then you're going into the dealership and you're taking a look and you're getting a salesperson's name. From a marketer's perspective, you've interacted now with their brand probably on 5 or 6, 7 different occasions, and they have no idea. They have no idea what you've done, where you've done them, and how to tie it all together to a single user. And so, that's the problem that Lukai kind of set out to solve. Big data is a component of that. We use big, I think people here probably are thinking about big data and kind of the, high throughput, high latency, cloud-based Hadoop type instances. We do use that type of technology for some sorts of problems for analytics. But we talk about our systems fondly as we've got, the train, the car, and the motorcycle, right? So you use high throughput, kind of high latency things for certain situations, and then your lower throughput, low latency things. So harnessing all that data was a problem we set out to solve, but that wasn't it. It was actually the idea that once you collect that data and you're able to take a look at things, you actually want to do something with it. And I think too often it's all about analysis and all about giving some sort of answer, but it's kind of like, then what? So in our case, we are able to collect all the data, we're able to tie it all to a single user, and then what we can do is actually pass that data along for some sort of activation, some business use. So now Ford.com now knows you're on their website, and they know that your lease is coming up in 6 months. They want to show you a totally different site experience than someone that's coming in that they've never interacted with before. So being able to send that set of users with that data they collected over to someone that does site personalization, move that data around so it can be activated. One example.
Andrew, how about you? You don't have to pick your own company.
I was going to, but I thought of a better one. So probably the most fantastic use of big data that I've come across is modeling the entirety of the global supply chain for a commodity, particularly agricultural commodities. Like corn is one that comes up all the time. And a lot of people don't think about what goes into the entire ecosystem of, something as simple as corn. In the US, we have this organization called the USDA, which puts out a crop report, which says, on this date, we're going to have produced this many bushels of corn, and, in the US, the transport is very regular, so we know it's going to hit the market at this time. And so we can price, this is what the spot price on the market is. And that's a very typical model. And there's many people who are involved in that. It's, the farmers who produce it, what should I be producing, when should I be producing it? It's the people who actually move it. How do I get my shipping containers and cargo, whatever stuff, in the right place at the right time so I can move the corn from point A to point B? There's the traders who actually write all the derivatives so that the farmer can hedge his risk, so that the person who's buying it can, do their futures contracts, whatever. And then you have the buyers, the people who turn the corn into food. And then on top of all that, you have governments who are worried about food supply and food security because, when your citizens get upset, it affects the government. Well, in the US, for many years, we kind of enjoyed that kind of well-structured, well-organized food economy. Well, today, we have a global food supply chain and a global food production. So even though we have a USDA here that knows pretty much exactly how much corn we're going to produce, we don't know how much corn they're going to produce in Egypt or in many parts of the developing world. They don't have a very good sense in their own countries. They don't have equivalent organizations. Yet, because it's now a global supply chain, and we get our food comes from all over the planet, and your corn is mixed with corn from many other countries, it still influences, what you should be doing and when you should be doing it. So there's been an enormous amount of interest, actually from the individual companies that are big conglomerates in this space, all the way up to like the IMF and the World Bank and stuff like that, to actually get a handle on what the real-time situation is of, say, the corn supply right now based on all the weather patterns and everything that we've seen, and so that we can actually predict what the real kind of state of the global food supply is for a particular commodity. And it's not just, to maximize profit, it's so that, the farmer in Africa knows what they should be planting because they know what Argentina is going to be planting this year because they actually have a good kind of like status of what's going on the ground. So it turns out that the reason that has not been so done really up until now has not been because we didn't know that it could be done. It's that it is an epic big data problem because you have to take ground-based sensing networks, satellite sensing data, continuous updates from actual text data that, like, for example, in many countries, a lot of the farming data goes over text messages. You have to mine that and collect that so you have an idea of what the people on the ground are actually noticing as they're noticing it. And to be able to fuse it all together into a model of the planet, and to also know, where the barges are going to be that are going to take the food from continent to continent. That, for me, that's probably the most epic big data problem I've ever come across. And the scale is, in terms of the amount of data, is fantastic.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I think actually, in my mind, the most fascinating big data problem is something we use every day. It's very prolific. It's called search. It's called web search. In fact, I think web search is what triggered most of the advances in the big data space. So at the very beginning, I'm aware of sort of Microsoft early attempts to build search engines, and the thinking is, hey, we build these enterprise-based sort of solutions like SQL, sort of IIS. Yeah, we will use them on this data, and then soon enough, people realize, no, actually, the size of the data is just so big. We need to think of other solutions that are beyond the enterprise scale. So technologies like sort of big table, MapReduce, stuff which is right now fairly prolific in the big data space were sort of invented as sort of reaction to the size of the data that people saw in the specifically Google really in the web search space. One of the very first sort of early attempts to sort of deal with big data was the famous PageRank sort of algorithm, which is the core technology used in, so one of the core technologies used in actually ranking search results. So search and the maybe related problems in the space like online advertising are probably the sort of most prolific and large sort of big data problems that are sort of happening every day and contribute to technologies that have been invented just to deal with this big table. The NoSQL sort of movement was triggered by the web big data, MapReduce, and many others related from Google and other companies as well. So Yeah, web search, online advertising also very similar, page search in particular, or what people know it as sort of AdWords or AdSense. These are all big data problems that we sort of experience and use every day, sort of billions and billions of times. And it's probably the most, as I said, the most prolific big data problem that I'm aware of.
Big market.
Sure. What I find really fascinating is big data is shrinking the world. I think Dina talked to this a little bit, Andrew touched on this. We are able to deal with data volumes at speeds that are really unprecedented, and it's creating great opportunities, certainly some issues that I imagine we're going to talk about. We're pushing now about 200 billion records through our pipeline every year, and it seems to be doubling like every quarter. And so the amount of information that's out there about all of us, and publicly available information, is changing things markedly. The UN did a study and they did this in retrospect, but if they looked at all the Twitter traffic during the Haitian cholera outbreak, they would have got a 2-week jump on the cholera outbreak. And if you know anything about cholera, the time to action is very critical on curtailing the outbreak. And so you start to really see that this information that's flowing through our world is markedly changing it. We've had 150 years of urbanization and anonymization through just living close together and not knowing our neighbors. Well, we're going to Mayberry. We're going back to Mayberry. We're going to know everybody so well, and that is scary in some sense. But there's tremendous opportunities to connect with people, to build trust networks, to reach across the globe or back through time to people that you've long disconnected from. And you see amazing applications coming out of this. Your DNA is going to be available to do specialized, targeted, personalized drugs. Right now, pharmaceutical companies can really only they see about 30% efficacy in their drugs. Well, if they know your DNA, they will know that for certain segments, these drugs will work 100% of the time for a certain segment of people. This is unprecedented. This is earth-changing. There is hype, I will grant you. But there is, to Ahmed's point, there is some real technology here, some real tools that are unlocking capabilities that we've never seen before. Just personally, when we started to look at introducing some of these technologies, we hadn't done a full data build. This was about 4 or 5 years ago, in about 18 months. It took us about 3 months to do a complete build of our data. Using a relatively minor, small cluster, we were able to do a build in about 48 hours from about 2-3 months. So it was dramatic. These weren't vitamins. These were major steroidal drugs that unlocked technologies that were amazing, and it just propelled us into, over a few short years, into an area where we could deal with so much volume at such a velocity that the applications we're just discovering them every day. Looking at all the traffic on the social nets and being able to demographically segment them, on seeing who's saying what about whom. I remember when Jodie Foster kind of came out on the Golden Globes, and it was a trending topic on Twitter. I was wondering, well, what did women think versus men? What did East Coast and West Coast? What did different economic strata think about that news? We don't know yet. I bet by the end of the year we will know that. We will have that kind of segmentation. Some of the things that we're kind of cooking back at the shop. So the world is getting smaller. It's an exciting place. There's a tremendous amount of issues that come out of that. But it's for innovation and to fuel entrepreneurial activity. I don't think we could live in a more exciting time.
So what's holding back the data revolution, right? We're talking about the speed at which it's happening, profound changes that we're seeing. What's holding us back? What do we need to do as a society, as government, as businesses? Ahmed?
Yeah, so I don't know about government. I can talk, in my space at least, in the machine learning community. So I think I'd like to make this analogy. I think IR, like before the web, IR was an existing discipline. Information retrieval, I'm sorry. Information retrieval was an existing discipline. It was used in libraries and, maybe in some enterprises. But the web caught it off guard. Suddenly, the existing sort of body of algorithms and techniques were not adequate for the and it took a fairly long, it took a few years before it actually caught up with the scale and the amount of data that was available on the web. Something similar to that is happening in the machine learning, data science space. So there's a sort of a dirty little secret that people who haven't used machine learning don't know, that most of the machine learning techniques that people use are not what people refer to as embarrassingly parallel. I mean, they don't lend themselves to parallelization, and there hasn't been much efforts to actually make these parallelizable, make these sort of run at scale. So, and we're still behind. So essentially, machine learning is not really still behind as far as compared to, for example, to how CPU power or storage is sort of improving over time. So that's one impedance, and we're seeing, you go to sort of machine learning and data mining conferences, and you see now, large percentage of the papers and the contributions are now focused on sort of big data. This was not the case. So there was a little bit of a delay, not sure why. So that's sort of one impedance. The other one, actually, there's still not a sort of consensus on exactly, there's been several sort of wars, if you will, on what exactly is a standard, distributed computing environment, or standard, NoSQL sort of system, or standard storage system. So there are still competing technologies, and I don't think some of the wars are still existing, and happening until there's sort of a winner and people sort of consensus agree that this is sort of the technology to use. These sort of conflicts haven't been resolved yet. There are privacy issues, right, which I'm sure the other peoples of the panel are going to talk about, and it's sort of also competing. So people are holding themselves back. Technology is holding themselves back a little bit because.
Maybe a follow-on question I'll ask and add the two questions for the rest of the panel. This concept of machine learning and kind of machine intelligence, how does that relate to humans as we go forward? And is machine to machine more important, or is machine to human more important?
Right. So actually, to me, I think it's important to know why is this happening? Why is data suddenly becoming so trivial? I think one of the reasons is, that's my own sort of, I think we're in the realm of opinions here at this point in time, is I think people have been talking about software as a service for a very, very long time. And Bill Gates was one of the early people who talked about it. And now actually we're finally seeing this happen, which is really cool. So I don't think it's interesting to be a travel agent at this point in time. There's very little value you could add over Expedia and Priceline and stuff like that. There may be, even dating, recruiting, LinkedIn and stuff like that. And we're seeing more industries, so software is really eating the world as people have been saying. So the problem with this is that people were expecting to deal with humans, right? Now they're dealing with software, right? So they expect the software to be also smart, right? And cope with their intricacies and sort of the changes in the environment and get smarter over time, which means it actually has to use data, it has to train on data and have intelligent components that are embedded in these services. So I think that's one of the reasons that suddenly we're interested in data. And also, storage technology has been improving. We seem to be able to to store much more data than we used to store like 5-6 years ago. So these are sort of the I think software as a service is really related to the sort of the data revolution. And had that not sort of evolved, we wouldn't have seen that much interest in sort of data. And I think they go hand in hand.
Andrew, can you tie together for us kind of how we should think about machine to machine, machine to human, and what we can do to make this revolution move faster?
I think to work a little bit off of what Ahmed was saying is that what machine learning really does in many levels is it handles, there's these 3 V's of big data: volume, velocity, variety. It's always thrown out, often without much definition or qualification. But that comes really down into the variety aspect of this. And that's something that traditionally in big data we have not done very well. But if you look at human preferences in our preference modeling, it's all about, it is very complex data. It is about things like environmental factors and the people you're with and when you're with them, what you were doing before you entered that environment. And right now, a lot of that data that we use for preference modeling is collected in a silo. It's like, this company over here collects this data because they have access to it because it's part of their business model to collect this data. But what happens is that, and they can mine that. That's where a lot of machine learning is applied today. The problem is that how do you transfer their model to the model that this completely other company has over here? So they've collected some slice of who you are. They understand things about you and how to interact with you. And then you have this company over here that has a very different business, but there's still aspects of who you are kind of as a customer that would transfer very well. But instead they're trying to build their own model from their own narrow slice. And kind of putting those together, kind of having like a uniform representation almost of human preferences when machines are talking to other machines, I think is one of the larger unsolved kind of like challenges in the space.
Great.
Yeah, so great topic. I think that there's a couple points. One, humans will always be involved in some part of the loop. I just did a talk, I did a couple talks on big data and thought crime at Strata, and the StrataCon Big Data Conference. And I presented there a felon detector. So based on someone's non-felony record, detect whether they're a felon. Definitely provocative, kind of Minority Report overtones. And and you can go to jimadler.me, that's my blog, you can see the slides there and the work. It's on GitHub now, the result of the classifier on GitHub, under iKnown actually. And what's interesting, so you come out with a classifier and you have always this false positive, false negative trade-off. If you err too much on the side of false positives, everybody's a felon. If you err too much on the false negatives, no, the detector doesn't find anybody. So there's a sort of anarchy, tyranny trade-off, right? If you're a dictator, you just put everybody in jail. And if in an anarchist state, nobody's in jail, and it's Thunderdome, chaos. And so the human, we have to sort of pick the operating point. And every machine learning classifier has some operating point. So we are going to be in this loop, whether we like it or not. And we need to graft ourselves to this technology. And I think that my second point is we can only do that through transparency. So I would argue that there's this coming wave of transparency because there's nothing that fuels a conspiracy faster than secrecy. And so I often talk about getting the geeks, the suits, and the wonks together to talk about the technology and how it makes money and what are the implications for society generally. And I think that is, the frameworks need to be put in place so we innovate responsibly. We listen to our tough critics. We get out ahead of any legislation or regulation to do things right. And I think to your question, Sheila, that's what's holding things back in a way. We don't know what's okay to do. And so as an entrepreneur, you don't really want to go burn through investor money if you're not sure that you're going to be regulated out of business or the market's going to freak out and like what happened to an app called Girls Around Me. Do you remember this app? It was a Foursquare app, and it told me what girls were around me, and everybody panicked the first weekend it was out, and Foursquare shut it off. And as an entrepreneur, you're like, you don't really want to be in that situation, and you're at the next board meeting. What happened to the app? Well, Foursquare shut it off. Not what you want to be as an entrepreneur. So I think we need to have some sensibilities around that.
Dina?
I would double down on a couple of the points here. One is really, it is about scale. We're at 1.5 trillion data points a month. We spend probably three full-time engineers on operations, which is a lot. So, as tools get better, systems get better, parallelization gets better, ability to
serve consumers and customers in the world, but also to protect those same people. We'll start with our Chief Privacy.
Sure. I don't want to plug posts, but I have to plug this one. So I did this post called "Creepy is as creepy does." You remember from Forrest Gump? "Stupid is as stupid does," I think was his quote. And it was a framework because our product people come to me all the time and say, "Jim, can we do this? Can we do this this feature or that feature?" And instead of just, I wanted to teach them to fish. And I didn't want them to come to me every time with an idea that I was just going to pass judgment. Yes, thou shalt do that. No, thou shalt not do that. And so I come up with this framework called the Places, Players, and Perils framework. And it goes something like this. The places really, you have to define, is this information public or private? If it's public information, that's one thing. If it's private information, that's another. And you have to kind of look at it in that context. The second dimension is, are the players involved? If there's a power gap between the players, there's more privacy concerns. For example, between peers, there's very little power gap, therefore not much privacy concern. But between certain members of the society, there could be. Target, are you familiar with Target knows you're expecting before your parents do? Did anybody see that story? Well, the data scientists at Target figured out not just that someone was pregnant, but when they were due, and they started to send coupons to the household. "Hey, we know you're expecting, how about these products?" Well, they didn't realize that this person was a teen mom, hadn't told her parents, and there was a power gap between child and parent that they were not sensitive to. And if they thought about it, they may have done something different, like messaged the customer before they delivered, no pun intended, the coupons. And so when there is a power gap, and if you look at the power gap, say, between a government and the citizen, which is sort of where the felon detector falls, there's huge Fourth Amendment constitutional protections. So huge power gap, huge privacy concerns. And the last leg of this, in the Places, Players, Perils framework, is perils. What can go wrong? What problems can emerge? In the case of a corporation that has a power disparity between their employees, there is the Fair Credit Reporting Act that says it doesn't matter where you get the data. If you're going to make an employment decision or a housing decision or an insurance decision, there are certain procedures you must go through. For example, if you find out that someone's criminal record shows they would be inappropriate to hire, you need to share that information with them. Why? They may be a victim of mistaken identity. There's a lot of John Smiths out there. And just because you have a criminal record on John Smith, that may not mean the John Smith that's sitting in front of you applying for a position. So this is a way that you can kind of decompose the privacy boogeyman that's out there that everyone's afraid of, to sort of get a handle on how to think about the problem, and when your spider sense should go off, and when you should listen to it, and when you might be over-rotated and not innovating hard enough.
Thank you. Dina?
Yeah, I mean, in the online space, it's kind of more black and white in some respects and then more gray in others. For us, it's all about transparency, notice, and choice. So we've got to give notice. Notice at the point of data collection, notice at the use of data collection. Be transparent. So we collect data on you anonymously, so all online data collected has to be anonymously. No PIIs associated. I don't know your email, don't know your phone number. But when I collect it, I need to let you know. When I use it, I need to let you know. I need to give you a way to be able to see what I have on you. So BlueKai has a registry. You can go see what does BlueKai know about you, and then give you an option to participate or not. So an option to opt out. Those are kind of the three good rules of thumb when it comes to online advertising and privacy. And actually, what some of the browsers are doing violates some of that. So Firefox saying, we're going to turn all third-party cookies off by default. Well, that doesn't give you much choice, does it? Most consumers that don't know those settings, or IE10 with some of the do not track stuff. But those are, I'd say, three good rules of thumb in terms of online. No PII, no PII.
We have PII.
No PII.
We're the PII part.
So don't touch
questions that we got from a number of the audience before was, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm interested in this space. I'm interested in big data. Looks like there's a lot of money in it, right? And within the next 4 years, the market's set to expand to about $50 billion plus. We hear our friends Big Blue, saying they took their 2015 numbers from 10 billion to 16 billion to 20 billion just in their analytics business. So, let's get some advice for the entrepreneurs in the audience. How should they play this trend? How should they think about starting companies? Where should they go on their path? Andrew, start with you.
Sure. There's a number of really good opportunities in this space. Two that come to mind immediately is, the first is there's a lot of industries out there that generate a surprising amount of data that nobody realizes they're generating, or wish they have it and they use it for one very narrow purpose and then discard it because they can't really store it and they can't figure out a business case for keeping it around. But it's nonetheless very valuable data. And to give a good example of this is I did some work with one of the large international auto manufacturers, and they've actually been collecting, basically they have sensors all over in their cars, and it's GPS tagged. And this stuff is, for many vehicles, is backhauled regularly, anonymized and scrubbed, and they use it for a variety of purposes. But they also pay NavTech and TeleAtlas, an extraordinary amount of money for maps in their vehicles. It was like $200 million a year. I mean, it was some ridiculous amount of money. And they were like, is it possible that we could take all the tags where everybody goes? It's just anonymous, like a vehicle drove here data. And can we, build maps out of that? Continuously update them, with road condition stuff. We have sensors. So like, you know what? Even if it costs $20 million, it could save so much money for us in terms of things. And we'd love to share our data with, say, for some of the other companies. It could be, we don't, they're paying the same money to the same. Can we cooperate and actually use this data to do something very different? And for many of these companies, it's not really their business to develop platforms like that. And as a result, they have these ideas somewhere in their strategy group or in their R&D group, and it never gets realized because it's just not their core business. They're selling cars. They're not doing, statistical cartography and analytics on the data they're, collecting from vehicles and various other sources to, build maps that they can use to then offset the costs that they pay to many other companies. The other area that I think there's a ton of opportunity is really kind of using a lot more of the variety of data sources that are out there. If you look at most of the analytics that are done today, that are very popular for big data and which get touted a lot, they're incredibly narrow verticals. When you look at a lot of people doing Twitter analytics, they're analyzing Twitter in the vacuum of Twitter, the echo chamber. And as a result, you get some very interesting and very biased analytics that don't always intersect with reality very well, but there's a lot of businesses doing that. One of the more interesting things that we did, for example, was let's say that you have the Twitter fire hose, and what happens when you intersect the Twitter fire hose with real-time Doppler radar, so that all the people who are tweeting in the rain, and you just segment people on the Twitter fire hose in real time by the weather environment that they're in. There are some amazing patterns that really drop out of what people talk about when they're sitting in the rain at the moment and when they transition to a dry spot. Or, even predicting when it's going to rain is going to get them 15 minutes before it gets to them. Could you, text them or tweet them and say, it's going to rain in 15 minutes, we actually see a cell, headed in your direction, go find shelter or an umbrella. And that's something that really is not being done to any significant extent at this scale, is actually taking different data sources and domains and finding really creative ways of putting them together. And it's not like an intractable problem, it's really just coming up with really creative ideas that use different data sources instead of where most companies just look at the data they have in front of them.
And specific to that idea, would you have people look at apps or platforms to do that? You're giving advice to entrepreneurs.
I actually do both. I'm a platforms guy, so I have a natural bias towards platforms. But there's a lot of opportunity for apps as well. From a monetization standpoint, I know a lot of people, friends who do pretty much nothing but app development, and it's a rough world out there. People who are finding ways to build creative platforms for like mobile devices and stuff that actually do indirectly or directly mix different data sources or find derivative kind of data models. Those companies are doing pretty well and tend to get snarfed up by other companies who want the kind of infrastructure they use to put those different data sets together.
Excellent. Snarfing up is a goal that we all share. Ave NE.
Yeah, so
Advice to entrepreneurs.
sure. I think there's so there is McKinsey published this report that data scientists are going to be in short supply until 2015 at least, if not 2017. So there is, there's this gap in sort of supply and demand for people like that. So there is room for, what people is referring to right now is sort of B2E businesses, that basically there are really large, I would say tens if not hundreds of sort of core problems in the big data space that are not solved. And so there's room to develop technologies that could be licensed to, or in some form or the other. There are a number of business models there to businesses in online advertising space, businesses that do actually recommendations, businesses that do any type of search. So there's room to build technologies like that and license them to sort of big players in the.
What are some specific examples?
Recommendation engines. Maybe it's time to have sort of one or two universal sort of recommendation engine systems that people can actually sort of license and use. There's just so many right now. It's time to settle the question, and there are good technologies and there are bad technologies. It's time to actually settle that. This is actually very interesting. So I'm sure you guys heard about the Netflix challenge. That was what, 2005, 2006. So what it proved in my mind is that you could, crowdsource machine learning, right? That works. So a company called Kaggle took notice of that, and Kaggle is, the kind of buzz and excitement they're causing in the machine learning community. But you could see this sort of this applying. There are a bunch of, I think last I checked there was about 70,000 subscribers. Yes, and about maybe 1 to 2 orders of magnitude submissions into this. So there, the Kaggle type of problems are the problems that take a look at these problems. These are problems that actually there are industries in the sort of drug companies, car companies, and all kinds of industries that are trying to solve desperately enough that they actually posted this as a challenge on Kaggle. So these are potential problems that actually could make good businesses as well. I would definitely take a look at that.
Dina, your advice.
Services to separate, signal from noise. IBM in 2005, I think, said that content doubles every 1,100 days. It's now every 11 days. They expect it to be every 11 hours. So much we've created, people in this room have created a big problem, and that's big data. We spend a lot of time trying to, we have solved a lot of the data collection, the data aggregation, actually some of the data tying across the varieties. But there's a lot to be done in terms of finding the jewels out of that data set. There's a company we work with called Datacratic, which is a great idea. They're just an algorithm engine. They're like, give us any data about algorithms, right? It's actually extremely useful because of the shortage of data scientists. We didn't have time to build our own, and we found someone that had some, algorithms that could get us models back in 2 minutes. Perfect, and it lets us focus on the data collection, the big data storage, the data delivery and activation pieces, and lets, data scientists do, for example, their stuff. So, signal from noise, that's the next big problem in mobile. In 2014, mobile content will surpass desktop. So,
Can you define signal from noise just to make sure everybody understands what you're talking
yeah,
about?
I mean, like I said, we have access to so much data now, but helping, whether it's a marketer, find what audience should be targeted, or whether it's helping develop a model based on some input of data. All of these things help people weed through the billions and trillions of data points that they now have access to. Whether it's visualization to help data pop, right? So now we input data and see what goes up and what goes down and trending. All of those things at scale are hard to do, and most companies that do big data, it's not always a core focus area for them.
Spam is the classic sort of noise too. But there are many forms of not necessarily adversarial types of noise, but spam is the classical one. Yeah.
And just a fun thing on the weather. So in advertising, Domino's actually came up, they want to do weather targeting because people, when it's raining, will order pizzas, are 2 times more likely to order pizzas. When it's snowing, 4 times more likely. I mean, so being able to just advertise, for example, on weather, right, is so simple, public information, and not done honestly. So
Well, I mean,
I love the weather.
yeah, no, I mean, that's, actually, that comes up all the time. I mean, at the work, we actually deal with the real-time weather feeds, and it sounds like it should be something that's simple to do. But it turns out that it's a extremely large sensing polygon data set that no traditional big data platform can actually handle, really, for all intents and purposes. So they run it like on batch mode, but for targeting, there's a lot of people who've done studies and research that says you can make an enormous amount of money, or at least make big improvements in your targeting if you know the weather right when the specific moment you target that person. And it's been a big challenge.
Jim?
I like on the signal noise, we're always trying to pull needles out of haystacks. And so in the big data, you never know, are you just getting more hay into this haystack, same number of needles, and so you're just adding noise, or are there no needles in this haystack? And so it's just a huge data problem with no signal. And so I think there are, I think that the tried and true statistical tools are welcome in this environment. There aren't enough folks that really are schooled in that. From advice to entrepreneurs, this is a great space. I think there's a good site, bigdatalandscape.com, that talks to many of the players in the space, and from infrastructure or technologies to infrastructure that wraps those technologies, and then to data as a service and app frameworks and apps. In my opinion, I think you're going to see, as you move down the stack, it becomes more open source, more commoditized. I think you're going to see some data sets move either down to be free, like Common Crawl, which is a free data set, and then you're going to see some specialized data sets actually move into applications, vertical applications, where I think there's a lot of value there. And I think for any of these opportunities we're talking about, chances are the good news is you're not alone in the room. There's other people that are chasing these opportunities, which are validating your marketplace, but don't ignore your competition. There's a lot of folks that are Andrew, you mentioned the traffic example, a lot of amazing folks in the traffic space. And so entrepreneurs, you got to look at the market opportunity, but you also got to look at who you're going to share that pie with. And from an investment perspective, of course, you always have to be cognizant of that. You are not the only one. Anybody see that GoDaddy commercial on the Super Bowl? It was great, where they were just slicing. Everybody had the same idea across the world. They were like finishing each other's sentences. And I feel like that's how big data is sometimes. Every idea, hundreds of people are having at the same time. But ideas are just ideas, and it really comes down to execution and the depth of your understanding of your customers and how you can serve them.